Aren't we all seekers? Aren't we all in search of something? Are we all in search of meaning? Join us as we take a look into our past, into the world of the ancients. We will journey with two explorers, George S. Alexander and Natalis Rosen, as they join the lines between fact and myth to make an astonishing discovery. A great civilization, a noble and powerful people, warriors, wealth, royalty, luxury, a lost legendary land. Is there any evidence that the ancient city of Atlantis could have existed? Could there be any truth behind the mystery, and how could we find out? History, as always, is a good place to start. I came across writings from the Greek philosopher Plato, who lived about 2,400 years ago. His descriptions of the 12,000-year-old Atlantis were very detailed and gave clues to everything from the size of Atlantis to its location, to the culture of the people who would have inhabited Atlantis at the time. Atlantis, to many, is no more than a legend, a myth. But as my research into Plato's work grew and deepened, Atlantis started to become more and more real.
But how did Plato obtain his information about the lost city?
His writings reveal that Plato received all his information from one of his ancestors called Solon, who lived 200 years before Plato. Solon was a great Greek statesman, and he was said to have invented democracy. Solon had traveled to Egypt, to the city of Sais, to find out more about the ancient history of our civilization. In those days, Egypt had the longest documented historical records available. Solon, as a statesman, had a vested interest to find out about the origin of human civilization and culture. There, an old Egyptian priest told him about the lost city of Atlantis and its mighty ancient empire, catastrophes, and war. He showed him the ancient hieroglyphs in the Egyptian temple, which detailed the story of Atlantis. According to the inscriptions, Egypt was once a colony of Atlantis, and that's how the ancient Egyptians had received this information. Unfortunately, the Temple of Sais doesn't exist anymore. It was built in the Nile Delta, in a swamp area, and has literally sunk into the soil. However, via Solon and Plato, the information from the ancient temple was preserved. Solon's detailed notes about the existence of this great empire were published 6 generations later by his descendant, Plato, the great philosopher. This is how the great legend survived.
So exactly what details did Plato save for future generations?
If we consider Africa 12,000 years ago, with some of its land laying 150 meters below sea level, then the coastline may have looked very similar to this. And according to Plato, these countries were colonies of Atlantis at the time. Plato tells us that the empire of Atlantis consisted of 10 kingdoms and was made up of a number of islands, coastlines, and peninsulas in the Atlantic Ocean. It was positioned outside Gibraltar, bordering on southern Spain, once called Cadiz. Today's city of Cadiz reminds us of the ancient name. The main island was also called Atlantis and was about 700 kilometers across. It had mountains around the coast and a great central plain. Its most prominent feature was the capital city of Atlantis. Plato gave a measurement of 127 stadia to the overall width of the city. If we take the ancient Greek conversion of 185 meters per stadia, it would make the capital city of Atlantis about 23.5 kilometers across, a huge city. Its layout was highly unusual, a city consisting of circles of land and water. Here are Plato's exact words.
There were alternate zones of sea and land, larger and smaller, encircling one another. There were 2 of land and 3 of water.
Here we have 2 land rings and 3 water rings, as Plato explained. The center of the city, unlike today's cities, was sparsely populated and was the holy and sacred center of the empire of Atlantis. It housed the king, royal family and their palaces, servants, and the magnificent temple of Poseidon, which was the main god of the Atlanteans. It also included the fabled Garden of Poseidon, with exotic trees and fruits, cold and hot springs, fountains and pools. This area was reserved for the royal elite and high priests only. It was protected by mighty walls and a ring of water. The first land ring can be described as the religious sector of the city. It was said to have been home to a large priesthood who performed numerous rituals and sacrifices at various shrines. It had towers, gates, and hanging gardens. Atlantis had a powerful navy, and the second water ring, according to Plato, was the military harbor that docked at least 1,200 warships. The second land ring housed the military and would have had living quarters for up to 240,000 sailors to man the ships. This ring also housed the naval stores and supplies. It had underground docks, soldiers' training facilities, towers and guardhouses. It had a road or a racetrack in the middle of it, which was 200 meters wide and ran right around the second land ring. This land ring was the military center of the empire. The third water ring was the harbor for merchant ships and also functioned as a public transport system, with small boats ferrying people from one part of the city to the other. Plato then describes the outer wall, which encircles what one would today call downtown Atlantis.
The area between the outer wall and the merchant harbor was densely crowded and busy all day and all night.
This indicates an enormous area, and if it was densely populated, then it suggests that the city of Atlantis had a truly immense population. The city may have been home to over 1 million people. It was considered a city of the gods, a utopia, rich in architecture, bustling with trade, and protected by a great army. And then, in a single day of violent upheaval about 12,000 years ago, Atlantis was completely destroyed. We can see here how comprehensively Plato had described the city's shape, design, and even its dimensions, a very unique model of a city set in water. Plato was a reputable philosopher and statesman and would not have risked jeopardizing his status by inventing a myth. Anyone during that time could have gone to Egypt to verify what he had said. Plato insisted that what he was saying was true. In his day, honor and truth were held higher than the value of life.